In this lecture, we're going to be talking about neurosuicide. In a nutshell, it's the reverse neuroplasticity. Previously, we talked about two different phenomena. First, we talked about how experience, behavior, and repetition and consistency can create structures and connections between neurons, and then when they fire together, they do wire together, eventually forming a neural structure or a neural network. And on the other hand, we also talked about how certain habits, certain behavior, certain experiences, or dropping behaviors and dropping habits can have a reverse effect on the neural network, breaking the chain and the connections and link between different neurons, and eventually disrupting the neural network that was previously formed throughout all the neurons that were linked and connected. Now, of course, when you want to change a habit or change a behavior, it's a good idea to stop the behavior, and then you will start eliminating the links between the neurons and eventually breaking the neural network that is causing this bad habit. But there are some things that we do on a regular basis and some things that we do in our lives that actually affect neuroplasticity in a negative way. And you might end up losing neural structures and networks and neuron links and connections that you actually need and that you actually want to use. The different concepts and the different ideas and behaviors that we're going to talk about can result in what we call neurosuicide, breaking the connection between all the different neurons and breaking neural structures and networks, thinking that we can't do anything about it, when in fact we can do something about it and we can change the way things are working. Later on, we're going to talk about techniques and ways to increase brain cells and neural networks and connections and neural growth. But in the same time, we need to learn what are the factors that have a negative impact on neural growth, structure, networks, and links. And the number one thing we want to talk about is creativity. From the age of 0 till the age of 3, the word no is said more than 150,000 times compared to the word yes that is said 5,000 times. And in fact, Psychology Today stated that the word no is one of the most dangerous words in the world. And the article is actually fascinating. They say, if I were to put you in an fMRI scanner, a huge donut-shaped magnet that can take a video of the neural changes happening in your brain and flash the word no for less than 1 second, you'd see a sudden release of dozens of stress-producing hormones and neurotransmitters. These chemicals immediately interrupt the normal functioning of your brain, impairing logic, reason, language processing, and communication. And that's me following the exact wording of Psychology Today. Therefore, you can see that the word no can have a huge impact on your brain. And unfortunately, facing the word no throughout your life all this time will have it wired in your brain when it comes to your own personal assessment. So every time you would get a new idea, you would say no. Every time you want to do something, you want to say no. Every time you have a new experience that you want to try, you would say no. Every time you want to try a new dish that you're not sure if you're really going to like it or not, you will say no. And this will limit your mind and limit your thoughts. And most importantly, it will limit your creativity. When it limits your creativity, this flow of ideas that can just keep you in constant brain stimulation will start to decrease a lot. And with less brain stimulation, your brain is not going to develop as much as it would if there was consistent brain stimulation. And when the person stops being creative, he creates a consistent lifestyle. You see that people, when they get to a certain point, they have a certain routine that is wired in their lifestyle. They wake up at a certain time, they take their coffee, they go to the gym, they work, they come back home, they make dinner, they watch something, and they sleep. It becomes a routine that is hardwired in their life because they're not getting creative anymore. They're not being open to new experiences. They are keeping this consistency in their lifestyle without opening up to any new experiences and always saying no. And every time you get a new idea, instead of sitting down and thinking about it, trying to collect creative thoughts and connect them all together to make sense out of the thoughts that you're having, you would just drop it and say no to this creative aspect of yourself. And creativity was found to be linked to long-term memory, concept construction and information structuring, and the activation of the neural networks that are used when the brain processes information using the highest forms of cognition. And then we have generations over generations of people born with the word no repeated more than any other word. And guess what that would do? It would crush your creativity. It would crush your infinite intelligence and imagination. What most people disregard is that creativity, which is linked to imagination, together they form an infinite intelligence form. You can tap into ideas and thoughts that nobody ever thought about. You can find solutions to problems that nobody would ever think about. And that's exactly why we call it infinite intelligence, because there's nothing that you can't achieve through creativity and imagination. And the biggest proof is all the success stories out there. They all started with imagination. People imagined themselves going to the moon, and they did it. People imagined operating on a heart, and they did it. But if nobody ever imagined going to the moon, nobody would have ever went there. And imagining going there is one thing, but getting creative enough to know how to get there is an entirely different story. And adding to all of this, technology. Technology can in fact be used to increase brain power. It can help with the process of neuroplasticity, but unfortunately, people are not using it for these purposes. Just a quick example would be, there are a lot of apps on your smartphone that can help boost your brain power. A lot of apps that help with memory and recalling and logic. And most people don't use these apps. They want to use apps that are related to games and social media and social networking. Technology made it possible to have a tablet where you can draw and become creative. You can have apps where you can create three-dimensional figures. You get access to countless amount of information that can help you on a daily basis. You can learn anything you want throughout technology nowadays, but most people, they drop everything and just use their smartphones for social media. But here's the thing about social media. Every single time you get a notification or you get a message, there is a release of dopamine inside your brain. And this is what researchers found, that every single time you get something on your phone, there is a small release of dopamine in your brain. And Simon Sinek talked about this when he said, sometimes when people feel down, they would send 10 messages to 10 different people saying hi, 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 hi. And then when people reply, it makes you feel good. There's this dopamine rush inside of you that makes you feel good. And unfortunately, just like drugs and alcohol, cell phones and social media can become an addiction. Nowadays, when people at the age of 2 use tablets more than they talk to their parents, they will learn most of the things from the tablets and not from their parents. When people at the age of 8, 9, and 10 are exposed to Instagram and Facebook, they will base their dreams and aspirations based on what they're seeing on these social media platforms. And in fact, using cell phones and social media platforms in specific showed a correlation between it and depression and anxiety, sleep deprivation, envy, communication issues, and self-image judgment. And furthermore, we have something in our brain called mirror neurons. People tend to replicate behavior that they see around them. There are certain pranks that have been done over the times where a group of individuals would agree to do a certain behavior that goes against normal behavior, and there's one person that don't know what's going on. As an example, there was a prank in a grocery store where there's a guy who whistles, and as soon as he does, everybody would switch their carts or their baskets together. And then there's one customer in the middle that just don't know what they need to do. And then somebody would come towards them, give them their cart, and then they would give them their own cart to them, just because everybody's doing it. So this is how mirror neurons work. Now, conversely, when we come to social media, everybody is imitating people on social media, and most of the times it's not a really good role model that they're following on their social media platforms. And not just that, because of the mirroring neurons, they get very limited and they stop also being creative, because all what they're doing is imitating people. What is making people famous? What is making people money? We want to imitate that because that's what every single person wants. He wants to have this exceptional existence on social media platforms so he can show off in front of his friends. So whenever there's a behavior that would move him towards this goal, he would adapt it immediately. And on top of all of this, you want to add the sense of patience. In a world where if you want something, you can go on Amazon and order it immediately. In an age where if you miss someone, you can FaceTime them. If you want to talk to someone, you can send them a message. If you want to meet someone new, if you want to meet a girl or meet a guy, you can just swipe right or left on Tinder and then you found them. If you want to listen to a new song, you can just go on Spotify or on YouTube and look for it. You don't have to go and buy the CD. Patience dropped. People went from having dreams that they work on for a long time in their lives to dreams that they work on for 2-3 weeks and then say, well, it's somebody else's mistake. There's another reason other than me. That's why I can't do it. They never blame themselves and they don't have any kind of patience. And the only way for neuroplasticity to be effective, as we said before, is through consistency. And if you don't have the patience to keep up the consistency, guess what? Most probably, you will not be able to achieve efficient and effective brain plasticity. When your mind gets wired or rewired, it'll be out of your control. You will not even be aware of it, and you will have absolutely no control over it because you have no patience. Now, moving on, I want to talk about some bad habits. Some habits are not just bad for your body, but they can also affect your neural chains and networks and your brain health overall. So habits like smoking, eating too much sugar, getting too little sleep, loneliness, and consumption of alcohol, and a lot more, but these are the main ones. These are all habits that would affect your brain health in a negative way. And whether you want to admit that smoking, sugar, sleep, loneliness, and alcohol can have effects on your brain or not, I meet a lot of people who say, yeah, I've been smoking for years. It just doesn't do anything to my brain. In fact, it's not coming from me. It's coming from years and years of studies and research. When we say habits like smoking, too much sugar, too little sleep, loneliness, and alcohol can affect your mind, can affect your brain, can affect your neural chains and networks, and overall your neuroplasticity, we are talking based on scientific concepts and not just ideas that we collect from thin air. And in fact, one study found that smoking, aka nicotine, not just kills brain cells and neurons, it would actually stop your brain from producing more brain cells. It would block the process of cellular creation. But of course, we're not strictly talking about smoking tobacco. Smoking any kind of herbs, drugs, or tobacco can have similar side effects on the brain. Furthermore, too much sugar was found to cause impairments in memory and learning skills. Now, of course, there are two kinds of sugars out there. There is healthy sugar and there is bad sugar. Bad sugar that comes in candy and chocolate bar, if it's consumed a lot, it can cause impairments, memory, and learning skills. But fruits, for example, have a completely different role that is actually healthy for you and not detrimental. Sugar was also found to cause depression, and it was linked to dementia and Alzheimer's diseases. I will include an article that talks about all these bad habits so you can become aware of them and see which one of these habits do you most usually do and start looking into applying the course into changing this habit. And of course, too little sleep, loneliness, and alcohol also have similar side effects on the brain and the neurons and overall neuroplasticity. We're not going to go in details because there's going to be a lot of information provided in the article that I'm going to include. Moving on, we're going to talk about a concept that we're already familiar with, but we need to reinforce this concept. Consistency, where people are not patient enough. They can't keep up proper consistency, and therefore they fail in the process of neuroplasticity. We went through the science of how consistency actually creates these neural networks, how when there's a certain action that is happening on a repetitive basis and then there are two neurons that are linking, then when they fire together, they will link together. And the only way for them to link is through consistency. Once the consistency stops, the link will weaken. The more consistent you are, the stronger the link between the two neurons. And of course, eventually, the better and the stronger the link in the neural network itself. Moving on, we're going to talk about the lack of exercise. I did not want to include this as one of the bad habits because lack of exercise is not by itself a habit. But exercise spurs the development of new nerve cells and increases the connection between brain cells, specifically synapses. And this results in brains that are more efficient, plastic, and adaptive. Now, what would lack of exercise do? Well, it will not have any direct side effects like the ones we mentioned when it comes to smoking and alcohol. But we did talk before about how exercise is a keystone habit. So, lack of exercise can lead to a lack in other areas in your life. And the reason why lack of exercise can be considered as one of the neuro-suicide factors is because the concept of exercise for most people is going to the gym for an hour and a half, 6 days a week, and eating proper diet, when in fact this is not true. It is not that complicated. You can take it to whatever level you want to take, but training for 30 minutes a day, for 3 days a week, has a lot of good positive effects. And when exercising can be so simple, can be as simple as 30 minutes a day, 3 times a week, when you avoid that, this is neuro-suicide because these 1 hour and a half in your week can have incredible results when it comes to brain cells, neural networks and connections, and overall neuroplasticity. I'm not going to go more in details about the other keystone habits related to exercise, but by now, you know that lack of exercise by itself, without any other factors, without any of the other keystone habits that are related to exercise, is itself neuro-suicide. 30 minutes a day, 3 times a week is not hard. Even if it means watching half an hour less of Netflix, even if it means sleeping for 15 minutes less and going to bed 15 minutes later, getting this half an hour of exercise is crucial and avoiding it is terrible. And lastly, we're going to talk about 3 general yet specific concepts when it comes to neuroplasticity. First, recklessness. We talked before about how if there's a certain injury or trauma on the brain, this can cause the entire cortical map to change. It will create a cortical remapping. But of course, this consumes a lot of energy and this can block a lot of other neural networks that were formed. One very tiny tissue in the brain that gets damaged might be connected to a lot of different neural networks. And once this is gone, most of the chains will be broken. And then you have people going on bikes without a helmet. You have people doing reckless activities without keeping in their mind that in case something happens and there's a certain injury to their brain, it can be detrimental. It can have a lot of side effects, not just on them as their physical bodies, but on every single aspect of their behavior, of their personality, mental health related issues. They can have a lot of them. And all of this could be avoided if the person is not reckless. Of course, a lot of times, some things are just inevitable and you can't avoid them. But driving your car at 150 kilometers an hour, as I said, riding a motorcycle without putting a helmet on, these are all considered as acts of recklessness. And even though this is not strictly related to neuroplasticity in general, it is good to keep your head safe, thus your brain safe, to ensure proper neuroplasticity when you're working on other factors. Otherwise, you will block the process and you will be at a point where you're not even sure what's connected to what and what's going on in your mind. And this can result in strokes. This can result in people forgetting everything that happened in their lives. This can result in people forgetting how to speak, people not being able to walk, different things all related to recklessness. So always try to keep it safe, because your brain, your head and your brain, as much as they're powerful and they can change your life, they can be really fragile. And second thing is mental health. In a lot of different countries, mental health is not looked at as an issue. There are a lot of societies where talking about mental health is like talking about people who are crazy. In certain societies, it is not okay to show any weakness or say that you're sad or you're depressed. And all of this would create a mental toll that can mess with your neuroplasticity. Even people living in societies where there's a lot of mental health awareness and everybody knows a lot about it, and doctors are there to help and everything, and the system is with you, a lot of people just refuse to get any help. They think that they can solve the problem themselves and they don't need any help. And I encourage that. I highly encourage that. If you really think that you have a mental health issue and that you can overcome it yourself without seeing anyone, without taking any kind of medication, and you're positive, then go for it. This is the best way out of it. But if you've been having a chronic problem for several years and you've been trying to solve the problem by yourself and it's been years and it's not working, you might want to consider seeing someone, because this can affect the plasticity of your brain. Stress and anxiety and depression will stop brain cell regeneration and will also block neural growth. I had a marketing professor who once told us in class, if you are feeling depressed, if you are feeling anxious, if you are feeling sad, don't do marketing. And the reason why he said that is because when people are sad or depressed, their creativity gets limited, their mental functioning gets limited. You never see someone who is depressed creating a masterpiece. You don't ever see somebody who is depressed who is studying all day long and getting A's. Because depression has an effect on the mind and on the body. And unless you're willing to solve these problems, you're going to be in a state where you can't even help yourself out of your current mental situation, let alone being able to have this certain amount of plasticity in your brain. And finally, social and environmental development. There is a saying, birds of feather flock together. When you have 10 friends and 9 of them smoke, you will most probably either try it or also build the habit and become a smoker. If you have 10 friends and 9 of them watches Netflix every single day, you're either going to start watching Netflix every single day, or you're going to start watching Netflix more than you used to watch before. As a personal experience, my first year in college, I had roommates who always watched a TV show called How I Met Your Mother. Now, I wasn't really interested in TV shows in general. I wanted to always focus on work and on my studying. But every single time I come back home, every single time I sit in the living room, people are watching this show. Eventually, I started watching it as well. And then when my friends moved out and I stayed by myself, I was watching the show on a consistent basis. And the next year, when I moved in with new people, I was the person watching the show first and telling people that they need to watch it and that it's so good. But little did I know back then about neuroplasticity and social and environmental development and effect on different factors in life. So if you're trying to stop smoking and you're spending your time with 9 people who smoke out of 10, most probably it's not going to work unless each and every one of them is ready to support you and not ever say, hey, do you want to have a smoke? Unless they do that, most probably you're going to find it really hard to rewire your brain out of the habit of smoking. Now, think about this. Is anybody born arrogant? No, of course not. Nobody's born arrogant. But it's the social and environmental development that makes him arrogant. Most of the times, when one person is arrogant, it means that they are mirroring a person that is an essential part of their social circle. When somebody is sexist and doesn't believe in women's rights to do different things, it's most probably because they grew up in an environment and they experienced an environmental development that is in sync with those ideas. So most people focus on neuroplasticity and changing their mind when they are stuck in the same social and environmental situations. And simply, you cannot dry up if you're still sitting in water. In fact, society and environments contain the most experiences in every single person's lives. And that's why these are two of the most important factors when it comes to neuroplasticity. And that's why there's an entire set of exercises, an entire set of social exercises that is there to help you cope with all the different issues that you're having, all the different social and environmental issues that you're having, and how to, of course, overcome them. Simply put, if you move from the social and environmental development of process or circle that is causing a certain behavior to be wired in your mind into a different social environmental circle that goes against this behavior and habit, you are most likely to be able to have more control. In the example that we gave before, when you have a lot of friends that smoke, 9 out of 10 friends smoke, and you spend most of your times with them and you're trying to stop smoking, most probably it will not work. But if you start hanging out with people who exercise on a regular basis and don't smoke and eat healthy, then by the mere social and environmental influence, you will start overcoming the habit of smoking bit by bit. So as this lecture is coming to an end, I'm going to go quickly through the concepts because you need to keep them in mind and review them before you start working on your neuroplasticity journey. And we're going to talk about how to solve all these problems in further lectures. But for now, just becoming aware of them is good. First problem is the big obstacle in front of your creativity and imagination that limits your thoughts, keeps a consistency in the lifestyle that is detrimental. It kills all the new experiences that might actually teach you new things and expand your brain. And of course, technology that can absolutely destroy your creativity, let alone your brain functioning and structure. Bad habits that are having a lot of mental toll, that are making you lose a lot of mental energy and functions just because you're doing these habits and they're not doing you any good. Consistency, where most people are not patient enough, you need to learn how to be patient. Lack of exercise and giving excuses where you can't even find half an hour for 3 days a week to do some intermediate or average intensity workout. And lastly, recklessness, not taking care of your mental health, and having a social and environmental circle that is detrimental for your goals and your aspirations and your daily lifestyle, habits, and eventually life reflection. So I'll leave you with one last thought for you to be able to grasp the importance of social and environmental development. If you look around you, you're going to notice that most people who grew in a certain society turned up to have the same mentality, thoughts, norms, lifestyle, and habits that are existing in this specific society and environment. And of course, I'm not generalizing. I'm saying to you, close your eyes and think about people you know, or think about yourself, and see how much of the things that you do on a daily basis, how much of the things that are habits, some of the lifestyles that you have, that are actually very similar or identical to your social and environmental circle.